Yes, bro.
Nice. So now we record automatically, right?
Yeah, yeah, should record. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, man. So yo, so what do you think? Let's start with Elon Musk like last time. What do you think about the fact that he said the thing about the pyramids being built by aliens? I know it was a joke, but what was your take on that?
No, I understand where it comes from. Obviously, I do a lot of research dealing with the pyramids and a lot of elements dealing in that field there. But so I understand
Yeah.
where it comes from as far as the mathematics and it's all the different things that go into it. So I understand where he would where he would where he would get the idea from. But I mean, based
Yeah.
on my research, what I'm conducting now, I would say they had the capabilities to build the pyramids, but it's more like 50-50. If you know what I'm saying, it's more for my research. It's more 50-50. I'm still concluding right now, but it's more 50-50.
Yo, expand on that, please, because I'm not an expert on Egyptian history. I know a
Right,
little
right.
bit, but I want you to like really expand on that and tell me, do you think it's really alien uh involvement in that entire like the in that empire's history, or do you think that that empire's history was just like part of a greater history of the African continent, but the greatness and vastness of it is just so profound that today we try to attribute that to alien interference or whatever they call it these days.
Now that's what I'm saying. I know where it comes from because what it is, obviously now when you're dealing with the pyramids themselves, obviously the Great Pyramid, 2.3 million stone. And what I've seen, what I've talk about is that basically, in order to those 2.3 million stone had to have been accounted for in so many words. So you
Yeah,
couldn't have just made like said, all right, let's just get 2.3 million stones, let's just try and build it. They would have to have known they was going to build 2.3 million stones
yeah.
beforehand. So
Okay,
there was a level of advanced organization
okay.
or even computation to even get the stones and know the amount that would go into it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's what. So I
yeah.
understand where they would think aliens and extraterrestrial involvement would take
Mm.
place. You see what I'm saying? And even when you go to the function of it and all these different things, it's a very complicated structure that's really beyond us right now. But I understand where that theory will come from. You know what I mean?
Okay. So I'm with you. I understand where we might get that notion that
Mm-hmm.
that that humans, right, that us today are like the smartest and are like at the top of the food chain or the intellectual pyramid of all the civilizations that have existed, right?
Right.
But what if we have a different perspective? What if the other perspective is that maybe we're not actually the smartest? Maybe we've actually been going backwards in terms of intelligence,
Right.
and
Right.
we're
That's it. That's it.
actually regressing instead of progressing. But from our perspective, because we're expanding in the material realm, we learn how to build all this material stuff. We think we're getting more advanced. We figure out mathematics and chemistry and all this stuff, and we think we're so intelligent, and we should be technically, logically speaking, more advanced than ancient civilizations, right?
Right. Right.
But the evidence proves otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, how do we reconcile that? Because this is my thing, and I know Elon Musk was joking when he mentioned that aliens might have been involved in creating the pyramids, right? And,
Right.
and,
Right.
and, and other so-called other theorists have said that if the aliens didn't build it, the aliens were at least involved in building
Mm-hmm.
it. They were at least involved in giving the knowledge to the people to build it.
Right. Right. Right.
So now, and I think this is like a very critical moment in human history, in our civilization, right? It's like, how
Mm-hmm.
do we reconcile these two different schools of thoughts, these two different realities? Because these two realities, in a way, would define how we progress as a civilization, right? Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. What's that again? Couldn't hear you. Say that again.
So these two different schools of thoughts, right? And let me let
Right.
me, let me repeat the schools of thought. The schools of thought that we're actually the first one is that we're progressing forward. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
an example is we're progressing as in like, let me give you an example like, oh, we've mastered chemistry, we've mastered the sciences, we've mastered the physical world, we're going into the
Mm-hmm.
chemical world, and now we're
Right.
going into
Right.
the subatomic, subnuclear, quantum world,
Quantum
right?
world. Right. Right.
So we think we're so intelligent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other school of thought is that we're actually not progressing, we're regressing. So
Mm-hmm.
we're actually just essentially becoming more specific in our fields of concentration, in our fields of expertise, but we're
Right.
actually disconnecting from the original truth. And
Okay. Okay.
we perceive ourselves as being more advanced because we figure out how to make uh, a material phone or material things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's kind of like let me use alchemy as an analogy. An alchemist is a master of everything,
Right. Right.
right? He's a master, and because of he's a master of everything, he masters one, he masters all.
Mm-hmm.
But a physicist or a chemist or a mathematician, blah blah blah, they're masters of different fields that evolve out of alchemy. And alchemy is a study of everything essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? So essentially, those are the two schools of thoughts. These are schools of thoughts of oneness, of the original intelligence being the most profound intelligence, or it's the perspective of the original intelligence was a zero, and we're advancing since then, and we're getting better over time.
Right. Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
I see, but see, obviously, I'll say that yes, we are essentially digressing, but I think what took place was there was a high amount, from my understanding, there was a high amount of knowledge that was present within the ancient world, and then there was this essentially almost cataclysmic event in so many words
Okay.
that then caused the knowledge to essentially get lost, and we're trying to find this knowledge right now. We're trying to find this knowledge, but from my perspective, what we have right now, we're not really even as close, really, to the level that they was really at. You know, even when I spoke about dealing with just the computation, we're not even at the level. Like even when I spoke about one of my most recent videos, spoke about how, you know, like for example, a light bulb is 95% inefficient, right?
Huh?
But the when you look at plants, for example, now the plants essentially, when you deal with photosynthesis, they understood that, or they observed the plants, that this photosynthesis is essentially more complicated than what we've previously been told, and essentially there's a quantum process taking place, and the plant is able to absorb the photon and the energy of the photon at a 95% efficiency rate.
Mm-hmm.
So the light bulb being 95% inefficient, we're not even really close to being on nature's level. Nature really is the highest level and the highest technology on this planet. We're not even close to really reaching that right now. So really, we are regressing, and obviously where we need to go next really is to get to the quantum computation and really the advanced levels that nature, the level that nature is already at. So we can learn from nature and learn the quantum nature and learn about the quantum computer and learn about all these elements that are in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we advance and move forward. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, and thanks for that perspective. That's a great way to put it. And I can pick it back off of that. So an analogy that I just thought of, for example, is the analogy of a stamp, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know the stamp where you take the stamp and you stamp it into the ink, and then you stamp your stamp on a piece of paper.
Right.
So over time, what happens to the ink and the stamp? It starts to fade, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what happens when it starts to fade? You take the stamp and you put it into the ink, and you get a new rich ink that you stamp into a new piece of paper, right?
Right.
So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that the original knowledge of the universe, the original theories, the original sort of school of thought that existed prior to today, it's like the ink, it's like the original ink, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to go back like a Sankofa. We have to go back and
Okay.
dig into that ink,
Mm-hmm.
and then that way we can really get the full picture and see how things are really structured. Because right now we're disconnected, and we think we're getting more advanced, but we're actually getting less advanced. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna just speak a little bit on that, and I'm gonna use the theory that I was working on.
Right.
I'm gonna show a visual representation of what I'm talking about.
But when you say advanced, are you saying the humans are becoming less intelligent, or are you saying just the technology itself isn't as advanced? What are you referring to when you speak on that?
It's a great question. I'm gonna use this picture right here to expand on that. So I printed out this paper that
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, you see that?
Yeah, I see it. I see it.
Okay, so you see the two different types of energies in the universe, right? So
Right.
we have to the left of it we have immaterial energy, and to the
Mm-hmm.
right of it we have material energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And material energy is certain, and immaterial energy is uncertain, right?
Right. Right.
So the 0 point in the middle is the point of inception. Is the if you look at it from the perspective of the universe, it would be the Big Bang, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it from the perspective of just how all systems work, it's the moment that the system gets turned on, right?
Right.
So
Right. Right.
when the system of intelligence gets turned on, what I when I can, let me use this to explain how we evolve over time. So to the right of us is our material expansion, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're expanding in our material realm, which is how we evolved to create all these material things around us,
Right.
right?
Right.
So we've mastered material, we've mastered matter. We now know how to create crystals in the lab, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, there's another expansion called immaterial expansion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened is we've actually become disconnected from immaterial expansion. But the problem with that is that immaterial expansion is actually the engine and the powering force for material expansion. So
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that we think we're getting smarter and getting more advanced because we're able to build all these things, all these material things, we're actually becoming more disconnected from the immaterial self and
Right.
the immaterial aspect of intelligence, the immaterial aspect of religion, of the universe,
Right. Right.
right? And to and let me see if I can break that down a little bit more, right? Immaterial as in the example I used before was using was to use the cell phone as an example, right? The cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
and how we mastered. We used to have the Nokia, right? We used to have the
Right.
older
Right.
phones. The older phones had no technology. All you could do was call on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we learned how to text on them,
Yeah.
and then we got ability to talk on
Internet,
them.
GPS, and
And then now we
mm-hmm.
have we have access to everything,
Right. Right.
all the information
Mm-hmm.
from through this device, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this device has become they've mastered it to a point where they've almost maximally maximized the potential for the physical phone, right?
Right. Right.
But now, if you use the human, if you use our civilization, if you use everything as a system, if you use if you use our evolution as a system, essentially what's happened is we've become disconnected from that immaterial self. We think that if we keep getting the phone bigger, we keep making the phone more advanced, we keep making the phone more powerful, it's gonna make us better. It's gonna make us. It's the definition of us progressing. But
Mm-hmm.
the actual information that is relevant that we have to actually focus on is what's in the phone. Because if you don't have any information to access, then what's the
Mm-hmm.
phone for?
Right. But would you say that obviously, okay, let's say, what if then, in actual, what's actually happening is the human actually, there's almost a limitation, and in actuality, the human intelligence is a limit, and then that's where the artificial intelligence has to come in, and what they're trying to build with the artificial intelligence is to take it to the next level, and that is to essentially go beyond the human capabilities, because the human is still, although we have there's infinite possibilities, the human is still finite in the sense that the human, as far as how far the human can go. So what if the artificial intelligence, age of artificial intelligence, is to go beyond and push the boundary of human thinking and possibilities that can be accessed? That makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And I mean that's a great way to put it, man. Because it's really it's one of those important questions where I feel like it's kind of our purpose. It's like why it's the reason why we're here,
Right,
right?
right.
Like and I like your example because when I think about it, it reminds me of the fact that human civilization, our purpose is actually to reconnect with ourselves,
Okay, okay.
right? And what do I
Right,
mean
right.
by that? I mean the reason why we've been searching for this the reason why we advance technology and it's going to culminate when we figure out artificial intelligence is
Mm-hmm.
because AI is actually just going to give us the ability to access that immaterial intelligence that already exists around us. But
Right,
because,
right.
but because we're sort of in a way stuck in this material reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are limited and we are constrained by our physical body, because our physical body in the material universe, everything dies.
Right,
Birth,
right.
death and birth are the two original constraints of the universe. And
Mortality, right, right.
exactly, and those two constraints are the constraints that created mortality, and that's the reason why galaxies die, planets
Mm-hmm.
die,
Mm-hmm.
humans die, animals die.
Right, right.
Everything that is made of material dies, and all
Mm-hmm.
material is just intelligence that has been confined and constrained so much that it literally becomes a material phenomena. And an
Mm-hmm.
example is a diamond.
Right, right.
What's a diamond? What are crystals?
The diamond, the hardest natural substance.
It's just information that has been compacted for millions of years,
Right, right.
that it literally created a diamond, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the immaterial universe works. So going back full circle to what you mentioned about AI,
Right, right.
2020, I feel like is a year where AI is gonna really go to the next level.
What,
And what
2020 you said? 2020?
2020 right now, this
Okay,
this
right,
moment
right,
this
right.
moment that we're experiencing is a moment of like, it's the beginning of the next frontier,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is the beginning of the time when we're gonna now detach from the material reality, because we're realizing that this is a finite reality, and we actually have access to an infinite reality.
Right, right.
And this infinite reality is our immaterial, it's our immaterial sense. It's
Mm-hmm.
essentially, imagine instead of having to use this phone to access all the stuff on the phone, imagine you were actually in the phone. Imagine you
Right,
were in the
right.
phone already.
Mm-hmm.
That way you don't have to type.
Right, right.
That way you don't have to talk.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
But would you say, obviously, now when you talk about, I like how you talk about the, diamond essentially is just information that's basically just obviously over time and things of that nature. But would you say that essentially there's there's a there's a rule book that's essentially like like could be, you got algorithms right now, you got algorithms and stuff. Would you say
Algorithm.
that over time a rule book can actually a type of rule book can actually start to be created, and essentially to go to the next level, you have to essentially break this rule book in so many words. So there's, I don't know, it's hard to explain it, but this is one of my new theories I'm thinking about right now. But basically, there's
Mm-hmm.
this rule book,
Yeah, I'm interested.
and
That
there's
sounds fascinating.
so there's this atomic rule book or this quantum rule book where it essentially tells matter that how to essentially behave, and this matter has this behavior that's quantified based on this rule book. And in order to go to the next level, you have to essentially break the rule book in some of the words, which I speak about. I know one of my concepts to speak about the
Mm-hmm.
Higgs field manipulation. And essentially, what they did was, when they moved a lot of these stones, essentially they had to manipulate this Higgs field, which is actually the rule book that links to density and obviously gravity and all these different things. But they had to manipulate this rule book to be able to move these stones and do what they did. And they was just on another level. You know what I'm saying? Just on another level. You know.
This goes back to what I was talking about. All they're accessing, so they're accessing the Higgs field, right? That's what they call it in physics. But what's the Higgs field exactly? The Higgs field is just a field it's the lowest field. It's the field that existed the moment of the inception,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
And this
Right.
is the
Right.
lowest level we can go backwards in time. And in
Mm-hmm.
this field is mathematically modeled. This is the whole point of this, was for us to convert this knowledge into mathematics. It's
Mm-hmm.
modeled as all possibilities.
Right. Right.
So in the Higgs field, all realities are possible. All
Mm-hmm.
realities do exist in the Higgs field. So if you can access the Higgs field, you can essentially manipulate reality like a god. You
That's
can
right. That's right.
essentially control energy
Mm-hmm.
and create sort of anything. There is no limit to your existence in the immaterial realm,
That's right. That's
right?
right.
And that's what they're referring to. And let me give an example, quick analogy. So when a really fast jet breaks the sound barrier, you know how you see like a portal opens,
Right. Right.
and there's a massive boom, right?
Right. Right.
and that's just the sound barrier, and that's because the sound barrier is so fast that when you crack it, when you hit a certain mark, it literally creates a portal. A huge portal opens up, and the plane goes through the portal, right? So now, let's take that same thing and let's go faster. Now imagine that's the speed of sound now, the speed of light.
Right.
What do you think happens when you go that fast?
I mean, you go into time and space right there. You go into, gravity and things of that nature.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. When you go that fast, a portal opens.
So you're saying, so to tap into that just briefly. So you're saying, okay, so with the sound barrier and the plane breaks the sound barrier, you got the portal. Let's say when the plane now goes speed of light now, you're saying now time starts to break down. The constraints of time now, you start to go into that level now.
You are at that level now.
Okay.
If you get to the speed of light, which is sort of like, in a way, it's the constant. The reason why immaterial energy is only constrained by time is because when immaterial energy has no constraint. So you in the immaterial realm, you are going at the speed of light. Let me give an example. Let me give an example right now. So right now, so I was born in Cameroon, right? So watch this. I'm gonna go to Cameroon right now and come back, right? Watch. It's already happened. So I went to Cameroon, came back. But you know why? Because if the moment I leave my physical body, this physical reality, then I can now travel at the speed of light.
Right.
I can go there and come back in a microsecond.
So you're saying the consciousness is traveling at speed of light or beyond what you say it's on its own level, so its own speed.
So the speed of light is the constant, it's the constraint of the universe. Which is why we see and we say, oh, the universe, when they use the Hubble telescope, they go, oh, it's expanding at the speed of light. So we assume the universe is expanding forever because we don't know where it's going to end. We don't know. It's expanding so fast. We can't even conceive of how big it is. But it's expanding at the speed of light while it's contracting at the speed of light also.
Okay.
So that's how it's able to keep this balanced, right? I mean, I'm going to show you. I made some diagrams so we can help people sort of visualize it.
So what's that then? What's that there?
So you see the sphere, right? You see this? There's a big
I see the circle.
So that imagine that big gray sphere is getting bigger and bigger and bigger outward, right? So let's say the sphere starts with radius 1. The radius gets bigger every second, right? Now look, you see the concentric circles within the sphere. But imagine those circles get smaller and smaller and smaller. So look, imagine those circles get smaller and smaller and smaller, while the biggest circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the small circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So check it out. So as the small circle is getting smaller, what's happening is it's taking energy, right? So look at this. I have orange juice here, right? Imagine I keep forcing more juice in here, right? And then it fills up. But I can still use pressure and keep forcing more. As I keep forcing more, that intelligence, that information becomes more compact and and builds more energy, right? So that's the contraction of the immaterial energy, right? And the expansion of material energy is the expansion of material. The expansion of material, as saying how we're evolving with more and more constraints being added to this intelligence.
Right.
So what happens? We create the crystal structures. We create crystals. We create material. We create if the scientists that talk about how life began on Earth, right? They talk about how we first had these microorganisms that eventually evolved from prokaryotic organisms to eukaryotic organisms, and these
Right.
organisms, algae-like organisms, were able to use the sun and,
Mhm.
and like you said before, get the sun energy, and then use the sun, and then use that energy to convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, and
Right.
that's
Right.
how they were able to build this protective layer around Earth, which allowed humanity and other sort of things to evolve and come into existence, right? So what I'm saying is that that immaterial intelligence, right,
Mhm.
became constrained, which created those microorganisms,
Right. Right.
which became more constrained, and because of those constraints, evolved to become. So an example of a constraint is this: a constraint is an outlier. Let me give you an example, right? So when we had all the once prokaryotic organisms existing, when two of them decided to link up and become one
Mhm.
and make a eukaryotic organism, that was the constraint that changed the evolution of those organisms. And then
Right.
so
Right.
now we have a new evolution of material, of the material existence.
Mhm.
And that's how humanity evolved. And that's how everything evolved from this one cell organism
Mhm.
all the way to whales and
Mhm.
eventually to humans,
Right. Right.
right? And this is how we go from immaterial to
Mhm.
material in the biological sense,
Mhm.
in the in the chemical sense, in the physical
Mhm.
sense, and in
Mhm.
the information sense.
But see, in regards to that, like, when you speak of obviously the evolution thing, would you say that different organisms, let's say humans, for example, there's different evolutions for different? Would you say we all come from the same thing, or is it different evolutions? Because obviously, obviously humans have consciousness and things like that. How does really consciousness really evolve then? Because I would say that the human has its own evolution, and then these other organisms have their evolution, so to speak. I believe that would have to be separate for the fact that there's consciousness present, and consciousness is still undefined as far as its evolutionary origins. Would you agree? So what would you be your take beyond that?
So here's my perspective on consciousness. So I believe that consciousness is intelligence.
Right, right.
That's how I model consciousness mathematically. It is
Mm-hmm,
intelligence.
mm-hmm.
And what is intelligence? Intelligence is all possibilities. You you see what I'm saying?
Right, right. Okay, right, right.
So intelligence is all possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm,
What do I mean by that? I mean everything that exists is a
mm-hmm,
manifestation of intelligence
mm-hmm.
in the physical constrained reality,
Right, right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Now I see where you're coming from, but obviously to say, I mean, when you say consciousness is intelligence, but intelligence, we obviously can develop intelligence. Intelligence grows, intelligence expands. How did consciousness get to this point within the human itself? Then would you say?
see, that's that. Okay, so that's the switch I was trying to make. Is that we're actually intelligence isn't like a. It's not tangible and it's not unique to each individual.
Mm-hmm,
Intelligence, like I said, exists as all possibilities. It exists
mm-hmm,
as a field,
mm-hmm.
right?
Right, right.
So when we're evolving, like I said, when we're evolving as a species, we evolve as a planet, we evolve as a galaxy, we
Right, right.
evolve as a solar. Because this is all just systems, like
Mm-hmm,
systems and systems and systems and systems and systems and systems. So
right,
when
right.
we evolve as a system, we evolve in we evolve in a dualistic sense, like I said before. We evolve in the material sense and we evolve in the immaterial sense. So when we're evolving, and like for
Mm-hmm,
example, if we look at the history of the world, let me use Earth as an example, right? The history of the
right, right.
world. We understand that life began on the continent of Africa,
Mm-hmm,
right? And to be
right,
more
right.
specific, life began in the Congo, in that area
Right,
of Africa. and from there that's where the original people, the original humans came from, and from there they replicated themselves, and they replicated themselves. They created, for example, if I was the first human on the planet, and I had a family, my kids would go and look for greener pastures. So they'll move around, but they'll take with them the original knowledge passed down from the original father, the original truth. And over time, that knowledge is what's gonna happen to that knowledge? It's gonna in a way devolve, because the son of the father is gonna have a slightly different interpretation. The son of the father is gonna have a slightly different perspective. The son of the father is gonna have a slightly different view. So it's gonna create a constraint where each new society that evolves from that original family is gonna still be linked to the original father. But if you go a long time, they might seem like completely different things. They might seem like they're not.
Would you say that, wouldn't the knowledge then diversify? Wouldn't you think the knowledge would diversify? So obviously, I like how you spoke about the source and you get the son and the father. Let's say he goes to a different environment now. He's able to essentially see a different part of the world that the father never saw. And that may inspire new knowledge, and he may study a different part of nature that is not part of that continent or that area, and may inspire a new realm of knowledge. If that makes sense.
So yes, I agree with you in that perspective, but I'm thinking from the perspective of the person is the individual. Humans are literally we're part of the system. We're not unique from the system. We're not observing the system. We're not observing the universe from outside. The universe is us.
Right.
We're just one of the expressions of it. And I think a better example I can give is this. I am no different. I am no different from a rock.
Okay.
But the only difference is that my physical reality is less is in a way less constrained than a rock, because a rock is just a bunch of energy. No, how about not a rock? A piece of wood. A piece of wood, right? If you burn a piece of wood, what happens to the energy? The energy is it's not gonna disappear. It's gonna
transform. Right.
What happens to the human body?
Same thing. Energy transforms.
The only difference is we have eyes. We have toes. We have eyes, ears. We have a nose. We have fingers. We have toes. So because we perceive our universe, and we think we're unique from our universe, we think we're above other material phenomena, other material existence, but we're not. We're the exact same expression, except that this intelligence happens to be speaking to another one right now. I'm speaking to myself by speaking to you, but you're constrained differently than I am. But if me and you were to really trace ourselves to the origin, we're the exact same person.
I agree 100%. But I also see the way I view consciousness. Consciousness is like essentially, there's a universal consciousness, and the consciousness exists as essentially an element, and that's an element of the universe, and then that becomes present within man and within these beings. I don't believe that consciousness essentially evolved, in so many words, because then if consciousness is to know self and to essentially reflect, do you evolve? That would have to already exist in its current form, and then you're trying to find yourself, and then you try to do through science and through different things, you're trying to find yourself. So in so many words, consciousness doesn't really evolve. But obviously there's one question that came in the chat, I'm saying, from one of my guys, Mr. Uncle Barber, and that, I'm saying, he was saying basically, is there such thing as a first man? Is there a first man? Would you say? So what would your take on the first man be?
Okay. So this is where the science gets muddy, right? So if we want to understand the history of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
The history of Earth doesn't start in Europe.
Right, right. Oh, definitely, definitely, definitely.
It doesn't start in Australia.
Right, right.
It doesn't start in South America or America. You know
Mm-hmm.
where it starts? It starts in Africa,
Right, right.
right? But now here's the question. The question is, how did it start?
Right, right.
From the perspective of my understanding from my studies
Mm-hmm.
and with understanding of physics and chemistry and biology,
Mm-hmm.
understanding the transformation of information and how information can essentially be man can be used. We can mold information,
Right,
and
right.
we can create stuff. We can make ourselves essentially what we call gods
Right,
in
right.
the from the religious perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, is it possible that an advanced civilization, an advanced manifestation of intelligence, will be able to create and mold other creatures
Right, right.
or other physical manifestations? And I
Mm-hmm.
say, why not?
Right, right.
I say it's very possible. But here's the other perspective. Well, the perspective is that humans, like everything else, evolved from the lowest level of intelligence, as in
Mm-hmm.
the lowest physical manifestation of intelligence, which was the
Mm-hmm.
algae that
Right,
existed
right.
in ancient times, in
Right,
millions
right.
of years ago. And this
Mm-hmm.
algae, because of the evolution and the constraint on material energy, evolved over time and
Mm-hmm.
eventually evolved to create what the human being is today, which is
Right,
just
right.
the latest manifestation of all those constraints on that energy and where that
Right, right.
model.
Okay, so I wanted to tap into that there. Okay, so I would definitely agree with the biological aspect of man comes from these, bacteria and these algae and stuff like that. But then there's still the innate mind and consciousness of man that I don't believe could have actually evolved. That would have to be in its other and have another origin. And obviously, when you go into different creation stories, obviously, I study a lot of creation stories from obviously different from Hinduism and the Vedas and the Rig Veda and things like that. They
Mm-hmm.
speak about essentially man as being as a physical man, and essentially there's
Yeah,
a innate. They say there's a multi-dimensional self in so many words, and they say
exactly.
essentially man and mind has two origins. So you have man, the physical body, and then you have manas. It's called manas, which means mind. And they say that essentially Brahma, this god Brahma, creates these mind-born sons. Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and then they say that once he creates his mind-born sons, he wants to bring forth death. In other words, he wants to bring forth mortality, and then that's how man becomes this current state. So essentially, what we have here is a man existing as manas, as just mind, as just consciousness, it's just an entity as consciousness, and then
Exactly.
it becoming and being infused in a physical man. In so many words, I like that aspect because again, it shows how there's a different origin as consciousness. And it's not just evolves on Earth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I like to study
Yeah,
different
yeah.
cultures.
So let's get one thing straight.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness is not unique to Earth.
Right, right,
It's unique to the universe. Everything is
right, right.
conscious.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Everything is intelligent. That's why I don't like to use the word conscious. I started to use the word intelligent or
Okay,
intelligence
okay.
because because what all intelligence is intelligence is just the fundamental rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Right, right.
And if you tell the fundamental rules to energy and then you let it evolve over time, it's gonna create evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And we witnessed this with the Fibonacci sequence and
Right,
all
right.
these other mathematical or geometric models that show us that you can give a system very basic rules,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's going to create extremely complex structures
Right, right.
from the most fundamental rules. So
Right, right.
so 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 what I'm saying here is that the deeper we go into understanding the universe, the rules get
Mm-hmm.
simpler. The
Right.
rules actually get easier.
Mm-hmm.
So the rules that explain biology, the chemical evolution, biological evolution, physical evolution, even our mental evolution, because our mind is still just a perception, because
Mm-hmm.
it's still based on our perception of reality.
Right, right.
You know, let's say if we didn't have eyes, let's say no human had eyes, then
Mm-hmm.
would we think the same?
Right, right.
Do we see things the same, or whatever, however you want to call it? So,
Mm-hmm.
so the consciousness or the intelligence, as I call it, is ubiquitous. It exists
Right,
everywhere.
right.
It's always been there. But we're lucky because we essentially our intelligence essentially found a way into a physical manifestation, and now this is how we exist in this physical realm. But the thing that we have to start teaching people is that this isn't the all it. This isn't all of it. This is just a fraction
Mm-hmm.
of your existence. This physical
So, so,
reality.
so essentially, what you're saying is consciousness just the same consciousness that's in us, or the same intelligence in us, is also in a rock, is also in a tree, in a dolphin, and so on and so forth.
Yes, sir. Because the rules that created the rocks, the rules that
Mm-hmm.
created the human,
Mm-hmm.
the rules that made our eye look the way it looks, the rules that made us be bipedals,
Mm-hmm.
creatures with two arms, based on the constraints. Those rules are the exact same rules that created trees.
Right,
Those are the
right.
exact same rules that create wild animals. It's the reason why
Mm-hmm.
lions have manes. It's the
Mm-hmm.
reason why zebras have stripes. It's the
Mm-hmm.
exact same rule. So in effect, intelligence itself is not some sort of complex computer program that all these Harvard, MIT people are in the lab working on all day. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually the most fundamental rules
Mm-hmm.
that can be applied to everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized too is that because of the way things have been so fragmented,
Mm-hmm.
we forget to look at the big picture,
Right, right.
which goes back to my idea about alchemy. The alchemist is the guy that masters everything. And a specialist is what we have today in the world. We have people that specialize on physics. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll never be able to really have a theory of everything because their
Mm-hmm.
perspective is literally constrained.
Right, right.
So what explains what rule what rule exists that explains all these other intelligent systems? Because
Mm-hmm.
all a human is a system,
Right, right.
right?
So essentially, with that, just tap into that right there. So essentially, if everything has one consciousness and the consciousness is the same, but it just expressed differently, would you say then that there would have to be then a unique part of the human that allows this consciousness to be expressed? So so you say there is, and are you saying our brains then are
So
different to, let's say, the dolphin and so on and so forth, and there's a unique element? What is that unique element from your perspective?
so here's the part that's going to be controversial: is that the unique element doesn't originate in us. It didn't start with us. The unique moment was
Mm-hmm.
this moment. Let me show you. The unique moment was the moment that time came into existence.
Right, right.
The moment that time comes into existence, it created
Mm-hmm.
supersymmetry.
Right, right.
Supersymmetry here today in the standard model in physics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Supersymmetry. But guess what? Guess what? The supersymmetry they're referring to, they're just saying the universe is supersymmetrical, but all they're saying is that the universe is basically material in material. It's
Right,
symmetrical.
right.
And
Right,
it's
right.
supersymmetrical. And that 0 point, if we would like to access the information, we just have to go to that point and we can access all that information.
Right,
Right?
right.
But what was the question you asked me again? I'm sorry, I kind of lost track for a second.
So I said, obviously, if consciousness exists and all consciousness is the same in rocks, trees, and so on and so forth, for us humans to express the intelligence that we express, there must be a unique aspect of the human itself. So what is that unique aspect within the human that
Time.
allows us to express it? Time.
Time.
Okay, then.
When all the philosophers since the beginning of human existence tell you time is the most important thing in the universe,
Right, right.
that's where they come in from.
So you mean time isn't in the human and time is in the human is what you're saying?
Because time is what permitted your existence.
Mm-hmm.
Because of time creating this symmetry, material energy was able to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And from that original time coming into existence, that time and that constant breaking of time has evolved to create everything that exists today. So if you were to trace yourself to let's do it like this. If I want to trace your lineage back to your forefathers, I could trace it back to Africa.
Right.
But let's say I want to let's get bigger. Let's say I want to trace your lineage back to the origin of of our galaxy. I could do that too, because the energy that's in your body never died. It just got it evolved. Your physical body died. The energy took something else, right? So now we can now go even bigger. Let's connect that same energy that is you today. Let's connect that to the original energy from the Big Bang.
Right.
So your entire existence exists because time exists.
Right. So, it's time essentially the unique aspect of the human then that allows the expression of the greater intelligence and the more complicated intelligence.
Exactly, and that's why time is relative.
Right. Okay then. Right. I see what
That's
you're saying.
why when Einstein figured out time, it changed everything.
Right.
Because now it just gave us access to almost a universal constant. Because if any civilization is advanced, they'll be masters of time.
Right. Okay.
If you're a master of time, what happens? You're not constrained. You're not constrained by material anymore, because now you can detach yourself from material and become unconstrained, and then go into the realm of immaterial, which is infinite. And now I'm going back full circle to what we were talking about when we started, about how were the ancient civilizations more advanced or less advanced?
Or were they more advanced or less advanced than us?
So
more advanced, of course. More advanced.
Exactly. And that's what I think we have to really learn and understand, that for us to really move forward, we have to essentially reconnect with the source. And from a perspective of Earth, that's with Africa. And this goes to his question, Mr. I can't pronounce his last name. He says, why Africa? Why not Earth itself? Because you have to go to the source. If you don't go to the source, you're going to be detached for infinity. And if you don't go to the source, you're never going to be able to learn the real patterns of humanity, of your existence. And let me give an example that everyone understands. Father and mother, right? This dualistic aspect of our reality goes all the way down to time itself. There's the reason why fathers and mothers exist.
Right.
The reason why masculine and feminine exist goes back to the origin of time. It's supersymmetry, right? But now check this out. So what does the word father? The word father comes from pattern, right? Like paternal.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree.
And what does a pattern do? Pattern just, it creates consistency, right? Right. Mother comes from what? Material. Right. What do you call Mother Nature? Material, right?
Right.
Pattern puts order in material, which creates the material universe.
Right.
Chaos until you put a pattern into it. That's why Mother Nature is everything, and the Father is a pattern, and he puts pattern, right? And this fundamentally shows you that everything that exists in the universe goes down fundamentally to the intelligence field, which is super symmetrical and expands in the material and immaterial realm as material energy and immaterial energy,
Right,
and
right.
this creates our existence today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's deep. It's deep. So, yeah, I definitely agree with it. I definitely agree with that right there. And obviously, I would say that the ancients themselves, they were more advanced. And obviously, we're trying to, in so many words, get back to that level. We're trying to catch up to that. But obviously, you know, what they was dealing with, you know, as far as what I was talking about dealing with the rule books, it was really breaking the rule books and breaking these rule books that our constraints today. They were breaking these constraints and really pushing the boundary of what is possible for the human right now. And they really took it to the next level. You know what I mean? So,
Like,
yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
And my hypothesis um, is that Africa is the focal point
Mm-hmm.
for planet Earth.
Right, right.
And I'm not saying that lightly. It is the focal point
Mm-hmm.
because until the African continent realigns itself with the truth, realigns itself with its actual identity, which is the identity of the origin of the planet,
Right, right.
identity of the source. It goes back to the source point.
Mm-hmm.
Until we realign that, the world itself is going to be, it's not going to get to a point of harmony. It's not going to get to a point of synergy because it's unbalanced when the source point is disconnected from. You know, it's
Right,
like the
right.
umbilical cord. It's like the umbilical
Mm-hmm.
cord when the child is born.
Mm-hmm.
It's attached to his mother from birth,
Right, right.
and it gets disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
You have to reattach that to get all that knowledge back.
So would you say that's the reason why? So Africa being essentially the source point, would you say that's the reason why all the minerals grow there and all the different things grow there because
I
is
think
that
it's
reason why?
exactly.
Okay,
It's the reason.
okay,
It's the
okay.
reason why it's in every way possible. The richest. It's the Garden of Eden. It's what they
Mm-hmm.
talk about in the religious texts in the Abrahamic religions. So you're talking about Christianity, Islam, Judaism, right? And
Yeah, Judaism, Islam, yeah.
in reality, all those religions are just they're just remnants. They're just almost, well, in a way, I don't want to say plagiarized or stolen information, but in a way, are just it's like the stamp. They've been watered down. They're the
Right,
watered
right.
down version of the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the truth only exists in Africa. The truth
Right, right.
only exists in the African story, and the African
Mm-hmm.
story is the story of the origin, is a story of
Right,
the source, is a story of the world.
right, right.
So once the Africans realign themselves, it's almost like you know, like when you it's what's it, when you put a battery, when you put a new battery in
Mm-hmm.
in something,
Right.
it works. It starts to work really well. So
Right,
that's what we
right.
have to do. The battery is dead. We have to take the old battery out and
Okay.
replace it. You know, we
Right,
have to
right.
cleanse it, and I think that's very important for not just Africa. This is important for the world.
So so if the religious texts then are essentially watered down information, essentially is it a good idea then essentially to take these texts and essentially decode the text and piece back together the puzzle? Would you say that? Would you say that's like, let's say for
Nah,
the Bible example, would you say that's
okay.
a good thing
So,
to do or not?
and that's a great question. That's a great question. I think what's going to have to happen is there's going to have to be a complete. We have to disregard all those texts because
Mm-hmm.
those things are just subsidiary. They're not the real version. An African has to write the real story of the world.
Okay, okay.
It's impossible for anyone that is not African to write that story because it's only going to be a substrate. It's only going to be a watered down version because their entire existence, their societies, their culture, their civilization
Mm-hmm.
evolved from the African story.
That's right, that's right, that's right.
So you cannot tell the story of the whole if you don't tell the
Mm-hmm.
story, if you don't know the story of the source, which is
Mm-hmm.
why that's why the father is important. The father
Mm-hmm.
creates the pattern. The moment the
Right.
father is taken out of the equation, it creates chaos because now there's no more pattern. What's
Mm-hmm.
pattern? Pattern is culture.
Right,
Pattern
right,
is systems.
right, right.
Pattern is language. These are things
Mm-hmm.
that are all manifestations of immaterial energy.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? This is how it all connects back to the source.
But then again, to tap into that, some would argue that these books are our books and that we were the original writers, and then they were
Hmm.
tainted later on by other people, but they are our books. What would you say to those people who say those books are actually ours?
So here's the thing. So from my understanding, the reason why the African story was never really written down was because the African story was understood. The African
Okay,
story did
okay.
not need to be written down.
Mm-hmm.
The African, if you, and the thing is like, and here's my issue with the whole religion and the whole Abrahamic sort of interpretations of the African sort of school of thought. That's what I call it. It's a school of thought. And it's the original school of thought. It's a school of thought that I'm trying to bring back so that people can really understand the
Right, right.
idea that really sort of allowed everything that existed today to exist, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
in a way, if you go to all over the world, their cultures, their language, everything is just it's just in a way a watered down version of
Mm-hmm.
what Africans did
Right.
hundreds of thousands,
Thousands. That's right. That's right.
even millions of years ago.
Right, right, right.
Because because everything that they tell us about this about their estimations
Mm-hmm.
are based on um they hypothesize and then they do experimentations and
Mm-hmm.
then they guess.
Right, right. Right, right.
Right? And
Uh-huh.
the reason why they guess is because they don't know the truth. The truth is within the African because the African
Mm-hmm.
every African has the truth within them.
Right, right.
That's because every African is connected to the source. Every African is connected directly to the original human
Mm-hmm.
that existed on this planet.
Okay, so just tap into that once again. So now, would you say that then the solution essentially would be to take these books away from the African, or would you say we just gotta decode the book and just take out certain pieces that are essentially the watered down pieces and piece it back together to try and wean them off it, or would you say just has to be removed directly and then what would your tip be on that?
I say we have to burn them because it's not
Right.
seriously. And that sounds really harsh, but it's the truth. And that's
Uh-huh.
because we have to understand fundamentally that that there's an immaterial aspect to our reality that we take for granted, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
and the reason why Africa as a continent was able to be taken advantage of was because we were tricked.
Mm-hmm.
And if you notice, tricks is what creates all the new constraints, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I mean by that. So look at Christianity, for example, right? So Christianity is an Abrahamic religion that uses a European Jesus, or however you want to call it, to be the savior of the African continent. So by
Mm-hmm.
bringing Christianity into the African continent, to the black people, to the
Mm-hmm.
original people of the planet, the original people, not, and it's fundamental in the skin color. It's not something we have to argue about,
Right, right.
right? So when you bring that and you tell the original person to worship essentially his son or
Mm-hmm.
a substitute of himself,
Right,
then
right, right.
you just hijack that entire continent because what
Mm-hmm.
they convinced Africans to do was to make the white man the middleman.
Right, right, right.
And
Mm-hmm.
by doing that, they convinced the African that the African himself wasn't God. But here's the truth:
Mm-hmm.
the
Right,
truth
right.
is that the African is God because the African is connected
Hey.
directly to God,
Right,
and
right.
that's why Africans aren't, in a way, Christians or Muslims or Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Africans are the people of energy. They're the people
Mm-hmm.
of God. They're the original
Mm-hmm.
people, which is why for thousands of years the African people have just in a way prevailed regardless of what circumstance is
Mm-hmm.
put on them, because no matter what
That's right, that's right.
happens, they have that connection, that rich ink, that no matter what happens, that ink never fades.
No phase. Okay, okay. That's right.
And I think that's an important thing to teach like the new generation, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the purpose of the Prince New Show. Is the purpose of why I'm working on this problem and why I have this book, New Globe Utopia. It's for
Mm-hmm.
everyone to make